We see a lot of budgets with clients that we work with that are really just accounting for, all the costs and, very little wiggle room left over, or they might just be created really just as a basis from last year. And, we're trying to account for a little bit of inflation, maybe a tiny bit of growth in 2026 compared to 2025. But to an individual donor that's wanting to review budgets or a granting organization, a foundation, when they see this, and you might have all this really nice impact, we want to grow, we want to scale, we want to increase our impact by these numbers and these percentages. But when they don't see room for that in your budget, it's pretty clear to them that, yes, they're going to be helping you fund that, but a lot of organizations that are funding you, they want to see a clear plan that's well aligned with what you're outlining for impact. They want to see that in your budget too. And so an impact aligned budget is definitely a critical component. And John Mark will build on this in the next slide by talking about an impact aligned fundraising strategy as well.
Absolutely. So just you understand that I know everyone here gets this. It costs money to create impact, to create real change in the form of people, in the form of advertising, in the form of lots of things. And so we've got to align our budget to account for the investments and impact that we want to create, which means we also need to account for this from a fundraising perspective, right? Why do we need to go, raise this much more money to increase our staff to be able to affect this change? And this is where things get really fun. And there's a lot of messaging frameworks that we can go through. There's a lot of ways to look at how do we align the fundraising strategy with our impact mission. So again, this all builds from the first slide onwards of what's the size of the problem that your organization exists to solve and what's the change that your organization seeks to create. And so if you imagine that pie chart that we've just thinking about the total available market, the size of the problem that you solve versus the actual group of people that you currently serve in that total available market. There's a lot of room for growth. And if you want to affect more and more change, you're going to need to staff up, you're going to need to augment programs, you need to make some shifts and make some changes. And you want to be able to clearly articulate this from a fundraising perspective so that donors can see the impact that they create when they give. I know we're repeating ourselves here, but this is what creates meaningful change from a fundraising perspective and an impact perspective together. And the strongest fundraising strategies are not just about raising money. They build trust through impact. Because when impact is the heart of the conversation, when it leads the conversation, funding follows. And this is true for all types of funders, and it's absolutely true going into the world that we live in today, where there's a lot of distrust and mistrust in institutions. And the more clear we can be, the more clearly we can articulate the impact that we seek to create is extremely important. So Lauren, I'm going to pass it back to you here for the impact first planning model.